Welcome to another edition of Florida Newsmakers with our very special guest, David Wilkins, the Secretary of the Department of Children and Families. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You've said this is the biggest year for improvements in the history of Florida's foster care system. Explain why.
Well, I really think that's true. I mean, not only over the last 2 years have we made a lot of program improvements in the foster care system, but this year in the legislative session, we really went after two significant changes in the law. And these changes are all about improving the lives of children. So in typical years, you see lots of legislation that helps providers, helps different organizations who are involved in different programs. This year, our legislation was all about the kids.
I've heard stories about all the steps foster parents would have to take to do something as simple as take their kids to parties or have a part-time job. Now, what problems did those cause?
Well, some of the rules that we have in foster care to the average person are just ridiculous. And they are ridiculous when you really think about them. But they were created over years and years of oversight of the foster care system, mainly to focus on trying to keep a child safe. But in the exercise of trying to keep a child safe, what we've really done is we've isolated the children. And through that isolation, they have not been able to succeed in school and extracurricular activities because there's such bureaucracy. So for instance, there were rules about, children, have to go to court to get approvals to travel out of town. They would have to potentially, next door neighbors may have to be background checked if a child wants to go over the sleepover. Just crazy things to the average person. And so what we basically said is, let's start with a clean slate, and let's start with the premise that all children in foster care should have all the rights and privileges that other kids have. And that's what this bill's all about.
What is giving you assurance that seeing those guidelines and precautions relaxed is a good step?
Well, first of all, it starts with the kids. I mean, we talked to a lot of the kids, you talked to many of the kids about, what was their life like in foster care, particularly in the teenage years with those kind of restrictions. Then we just looked at the results. When you looked at their high school graduation rates, their abilities to get into school, some of the extracurricular activities they're involved in, they were all so subpar compared to the normal kids. So we knew the kids were failing in the model that we had. So we also knew that this is just so obvious that if you give kids the chance to, in essence, be kids, then they're going to flourish just like all other kids.
Secretary, I know we've talked about this before about extending the foster care age from 18 to 21, but that comes with stipulations. Explain why.
Well, yeah, this issue about extending foster care to 21 is a different bill, but so directly related. And the reality is so many children in foster care, when they come into care, they've had to go through trauma in their life. Potentially losing a parent, being separated from a parent, potentially being exposed to horrible things. And so often they lose timing in school, whether it's a semester or a year. And so many of our kids, or well over half of our kids, by the time they're 18, they do not have their high school degree yet. And so because of that, we are in essence pushing them out on the street at 18. And if you don't even have your high school degree, you sure aren't ready to take on the world. And so we've recognized that, and so we said, wait a minute, let's give children an opportunity to stay in the foster care system so we can continue to protect them through the time frames for them to get their high school degree. And then when you do get your high school degree, let's now launch this scholarship program, which we call our independent living program, that in essence helps you be successful in your college endeavors or your vocational training endeavors so that you're really prepared to face reality out there in the real world.
You recently announced that you'll be launching a new technology to crack down on food stamp and welfare fraud. What type of fraud are we seeing?
Well, unfortunately, the food stamp and welfare systems have continued to grow. They really started spiking during the recession, and we still see growth so much in those systems. But over the last few years, particularly with some of the federal policy changes and some of the advents of new technologies, we're seeing a lot of abuse around identity theft. And so what is happening is if people can steal your identity, they can not only go after your credit cards, which you see that all the time, but they can go and apply for federal benefits and receive those benefits. And so we're seeing a dramatic spike in ID theft. And so what we have now implemented is we are the national pilot to implement new technologies that are going right after those criminals who are trying to steal identities and trying to get federal benefits when they're not authorized.
David Wilkins, Secretary of the Florida Department of Children and Families, thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you next time on Florida Newsmakers.